Good evening, guys. Good evening. Welcome to live session 2 of the Ayurvedic Success System. I hope everyone's had a fantastic day today. I hope everyone's had a brilliant start to the week. In a bonus session, we'll talk about kind of how we engineer brilliant days and therefore brilliant weeks. And I always say that Monday is the most important day of the week, because if we get Monday laid down properly in terms of our behaviors, our attitudes, our mindset, our what we eat, our exercise, and all of these kinds of things. It's that famous saying, isn't it? Well begun is half done. We start something well, we're on the way to making the whole coming week equally, empowered and positive and happy and successful. So I hope everyone's had a very happy, healthy, kind of positive Monday and positive start to the week. Before we dive in, just wanted to say a massive, very genuine thank you for all of the hundreds and hundreds of comments and messages and private messages that I've received, particularly last night, through the night actually, from people obviously all over the world, different time zones, but also this morning, about kind of that light bulb moment of suddenly understanding why, despite our best intentions and our best motivations, we kind of never have the ability to almost follow through, and why it's not our fault. It's not down to willpower. It's just down to that neurological hijacking that we spoke about yesterday. And I think it takes a lot of pressure off of us. I think it takes a lot of stress off of us, because we realize that we have to find a better way, a more organic and sustainable way, rather than just this blood, sweat and tears kind of pushing through. So a very sincere thank you for all the comments. Also a big thank you for all the comments. I posted up a question today about, what five things is everyone got planned today to help them live in the magic? One of the biggest takeaways from yesterday's session, and had some just beautiful responses to that around how people are planning on making this day as positive and happy and healthy as it can be. And it was really inspiring and motivating to read those. So again, a big thank you for all the interaction and all the support and motivation on this Facebook page. Before we dive in, as always, if everyone could just give me a barrage, an explosion of emojis, smiley faces, thumbs up, whatever you want to use, just to get the video to the top of the feed so that everyone trying to find it can find it just a little bit more easily. It's just a way of playing the algorithm in these private groups. So please do give me a barrage of emojis, smiley faces. That would be super grateful. So before we dive into the actual content tonight, just want to briefly recap on what we spoke about yesterday. Okay, and we spoke about the overarching emphasis in these Eastern traditions of this concept of living in the magic. We're going to refer to this virtually every session, all of the resources, particularly tomorrow, about this concept of living in the magic, this ceaseless unfolding of joy and happiness and contentment and vitality and financial abundance and service to others and happiness and all of the things that we all aspire to. This is what the Ayurvedic and the Eastern traditions call living in the magic. And we spoke about this as being our birthright, and it's something that we all aspire to. It's something that we all want to move into, we all want to experience, but actually statistically, so few of us do. About 87% of people statistically don't ever genuinely capitalize or move into their dreams, their goals, their kind of highest self. And like I said at the start of tonight, that's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's that neurological hijacking that I spoke about yesterday, where the brain, works in a way that tells us to not push out, not push forward, not strive for more, but just to stay safe. That evolutionary driver that we spoke about yesterday. And I know how hard that is, because I was there in 2018 when I said about, when I changed my life very dramatically. I felt all of that resistance and all of that, desire to stay safe. But, it's not about fighting it. It's about finding an alternative to it. And that's what tonight is about. Okay. So we mustn't get stuck in a rut. Okay. That's ultimately what that means. Life is too precious and life is too short, and life is too magical to play it safe, to not strive, to not reach for those goals, to not aim for more, to not be the best versions of ourselves. It's, you know, life is too precious to not strive for that, so that when we're on our deathbed, we don't look back and say, if only I'd done X, Y, and Z. There can be no room for that. So we must find a way out of this. We must find a way out of this stagnation and this inertia that often so many of us, myself included, often find ourselves in. And I think without it, I think you can achieve success without it. Okay, but I think it's isolated, and it's through the Western model of blood, sweat, and tears. I think we can all find success in a few small areas if we're using the blood, sweat, and tears model. You know, the pushing, the striving, the stress, the working harder, the wrong priorities. I think we can all find success, but we can only find success in a couple of areas in that context. We can't find success in all 8 of the primary areas of kind of wealth or success. You know, things like health, things like happiness, things like service to others, things like meaning and purpose, things like financial security. We'll talk about this tomorrow. I think we need this to be organic. We need it to be effortless. We need it to be all inclusive, so that we're cultivating this life, this brilliant life, this life lived in the magic, where all areas are either working brilliantly or we're moving towards them working brilliantly. And that's why tomorrow's session is fundamentally important, okay? Because tomorrow's session, we're talking about the 8 pillars of prosperity, and even more importantly, the Eastern Life Audit, which is this powerful, brilliant tool for working out exactly where we are right now, where we want to be, and how we close the gulf between them in all of these 8 primary areas. Okay, so that's the focus of tomorrow's session. But there's no point understanding that until we're able to outmaneuver this brain hijacking mechanism we spoke about yesterday. And we must find a way past this, okay? And paradoxically, the way out of this problem is by turning inwards. Okay, the way out of this neurological hijack is not out there, but it's in here. Okay, and remember yesterday we spoke about the Eastern traditions, particularly the Ayurvedic traditions, talking about how everything that we create in the outer world, all of the success and health and well-being and happiness, all the things we desire and want in the outside world, are simply a reflection of our inner environment. If we want to cultivate more collective success in the outer world, we have to consciously, specifically engineer the same qualities in our inner world, in our beliefs, our attitudes, our thoughts, particularly our expectations, before they will ever be manifested in the real world. And we can see that. Think about, I don't know, something like the Wright brothers, who invented the aeroplane. Okay, they didn't just walk into a workshop and build an aeroplane and fly it. The idea of an aeroplane, the idea of human flight, was embryonic in their mind for about 7 years before it took form. All we know is that they built it and it flew, but that was embryonic. They developed it in their beliefs, their expectations, their attitudes, their convictions before it ever reached physical fruition. Okay, and it's the same with us. Whatever we aspire to, there's actually phenomenal research around things like the conception of a child. Around, we have to cultivate the belief it's possible before it will be possible. There's 101 examples, but ultimately, I don't think it's possible to engineer a beautifully holistic, successful life in all of these 8 pillars until we engineer it inside of ourselves first, in our mind, our beliefs, our expectations. The problem with that is what we spoke about yesterday, where as soon as we tell the mind not to do something, it has to do it. Okay, so if we, I think I gave the example, didn't I, of a bright pink elephant. I said how if I said to you, whatever you do, as if your life depended upon it, don't think about a bright pink elephant. Everyone here, the first thing we'd all do is think about a bright pink elephant. Why? Because for the brain to process not thinking about something, it has to think about that thing first. It can't not focus on something without getting clarity on what it shouldn't be focusing on. So if we say to ourselves, okay, this year, finally, this year, 2025 is the year that I'm going to get the career that I want, that I'm going to start the business of my dreams, that I'm going to move into financial security, that I'm going to get healthy. The brain doesn't hear the emphasis. What it hears is, I've got an unsuccessful career, that I'm not happy, that I'm not financially secure, that I'm not healthy. The brain doesn't hear the context, it just hears the negative because of that evolutionary bias we spoke about yesterday. So what the brain is doing by thinking about, I want more money, or I want better health, or I want to have more meaning in my life, the brain just hears the opposite. I haven't got meaning, I'm not healthy, I'm financially insecure. And what do we know? The more we cultivate those beliefs and the more we engineer those attitudes, the more likely they are to develop in the real world because of the self-fulfilling prophecy that we spoke of yesterday. So we can't ever use the brain to support our move into the magic until we get it working for us rather than against us. This is one of the absolute most important takeaways from this whole week, because we spoke yesterday about living in the magic. Tomorrow we're going to speak about how we engineer that, and on Wednesday and Thursday. But tonight, this is how we get there, okay? Because until the brain is given a neurologically acceptable alternative, it will never buy into what you're telling it. Okay, it has to believe it, because remember, the neocortex, this negative part of the brain, which is an evolutionary driver, is constantly saying to us, don't move forward, don't take the risk, don't try to better this, stay safe, stay closed in. So if you try to outthink that, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to provide an alternative that the brain believes in enough that it's happy to pursue. And this is where the concept of neurological suggestibility becomes sacrosanct in a way that I can't overemphasize enough. It's paradigm changing. Okay, and if you've ever been in a situation where you deeply wanted something, but for some unknown reason you've never got there or you've never followed through, this is why. Okay, brain suggestibility. Brain suggestibility is a concept that is integral to the Eastern traditions, but is right at the forefront of the Western neurological research around behavior change, successful people, and how people, what differentiates people living lives they list as being happy and brilliant compared to people who don't. And neurological suggestibility is you can see this on, this isn't theory, this is something you can see in neuroscience. Something called an EEG, which is where you connect your brain up to a series of monitors to measure electrical activity. You can see on MRIs, brain imaging. So brain suggestibility is a neurological state where the brain is happy to accept new ways of thinking, being, and acting. Okay, so neurosuggestibility is where your brain as an organ is happy to accept new ways of being, thinking, and acting. Remember, yesterday we said about how the neocortex tries to prevent that. And neurosuggestibility is the only evidence-based, reliable way of outmaneuvering the limiting, restricting activity of the neocortex. So the brain suggestibility is essentially where we cultivate a brain activity that is working for us rather than against us. That's the simplest way of putting it. When our brain is in a more suggestible place, it's happy to say, yes, start that business. Yes, go for that promotion. Yes, confront this issue in this relationship. Yes, cultivate new hobbies and passions, whatever it may be. So it's suggestible to where you want to go, to what your higher ideals and dreams and goals and ambitions are. And as an example, imagine like a scenario like this, where you say, okay, this is going to be the year, come what may, that I am going to be able to say that I achieved the success I want, in whatever context that might look like for any given person. This is the year. 2025 is the year that I am going to make my life successful, okay? If we can say that till we're blue in the face, we can repeat that as a mantra or an affirmation 1,000,000 times a day. But if the brain doesn't believe it, or the brain doesn't want you to do it, if the brain is saying, if the neocortex is dominant and it's saying, actually don't do that, it's risky, it's unknown, it's full of uncertainty, it's full of fear, let's change the biochemistry, let's change the hormones so that we hijack that, so that it doesn't happen, so I can stay in the known, which is safe, which means I've got less chance of being injured or killed from that evolutionary perspective. So nothing happens, there's no change, there's no improvement, that success isn't realized because the brain hasn't been made suggestible to those higher ideals. But imagine the same scenario, a scenario where you say, this is going to be the year finally that I get the success that I want in these key areas. But you say that to a brain that has been primed to be happy and suggestible to that ideal. So that it no longer fights it. It no longer tries to hijack or sabotage it. It says, okay, you've essentially told me this ideal, this dream. I've processed it and I'm happy with it. It seems like a sensible idea. It seems like you've got it figured out. Let's go for it. So the neurology, the neurochemistry, the neurobiology doesn't then doesn't hijack or sabotage our actual actions. And we know that our inner beliefs are what create our outer reality, and then suddenly things begin to change. And that's why, for me, I said yesterday when I left my job and moved on to this path, for the first, almost a month actually, I wasn't interested in the specifics. I wasn't interested in the rational plans. I just spent the whole time creating the ideal. In 5 years' time, what does my ideal life look like in terms of my work, my working hours, what I'm doing, my relationships, my hobbies, my passions, how many hours I'm working, the amount of money I need. I just spent the whole time getting an insane amount of clarity using the tools we'll talk about today, tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. And all that does, when we say we are increasing the suggestibility of the brain, essentially what we're doing is getting the brain to work for us rather than against us. And what's so fascinating about this is, yes, this is something that the Ayurvedic and Eastern, particularly the Tibetan traditions, have been absolutely waxing lyrical about for thousands of years. And yet we fast forward to the 21st century, and I'm sure lots of you would have heard of this, a concept called neuroplasticity. Okay, neuroplasticity, and which is where essentially neuroplasticity is a neurological term which emphasizes the malleability, the changeability, the plasticity of the brain. So the brain isn't fixed and static and unchangeable. It's constantly changing depending upon the stimuli it receives. And on an MRI, say everyone here, all 47 people here now, or 150 people here now, went into an MRI and got our brains mapped. And we came back in about somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks of applying these techniques. You would be able to see new neural pathways in the brain that are supporting what your highest ideals are. Whatever, when we do the Eastern Life audit tomorrow, and we really funnel in on where my life is strong and where it's less strong, and how I strengthen all of the areas and move into these higher ideals, whatever that looks like for you, you can quantifiably see that as structural changes in the neural networks of the brain. And all that means is the brain is creating new thought patterns that are in support of your highest ideals, that are in support of you tangibly moving into the magic, living a life in the magic, where there's abundance and success and happiness and health and meaning and purpose and service to others and all of these kinds of things. So this isn't theory, it's not conjecture, it's not wishful thinking. This A plus B equals C. If we do these techniques, if we increase the suggestibility of the brain, I'm going to talk about how we do it in a minute. If we act in a way that we know neurologically is able to increase the suggestibility of the brain, you can see that suggestibility changing in the structure of the brain, and the brain then activates it in a way that lets us follow through on what we are desiring. And those two things are key. Okay, to move into the magic, we have to do two things. We have to sever the negative bias of the neocortex and the subconscious, which was the content of yesterday's session if you haven't watched that. But we also have to increase the suggestibility of the brain. Those two things have to happen. One without the other doesn't work. Okay. How do we increase the suggestibility of the brain? This is mandatory. Okay. And one of my mentors, who I learned so much of this from, spent years and years as a Western doctor. It spent years educated at Cambridge, spent years in Bhutanese monasteries, and he was taught this just ad nauseum again and again and again. How do we change? How do we make the brain suggestible? Okay, and it all comes down now in terms of the Western science, and Ayurveda has the practices, but the science has the answers. It comes down to brain waves. Okay, so if we hook our brain up to an EEG, that brain monitor, we have a wide variety of different brain waves which are responsible for different brain activities. We've got alpha, we've got beta, we've got delta, we've got gamma, we've got theta, we've got lots of different brain waves. Okay, so for example, alpha is responsible when you're daydreaming, when you're chilling out, when you're relaxing. Alpha brain waves are dominant, which is why you feel relaxed and chilled out and calm. But for most of our waking state, from when we wake up to when we go to bed, we're in beta state, which is our rational, ego-driven, protective, very kind of logical, safety-first, status quo maintaining, fearful brain. It's the rational brain, which which is the neocortex, which we've been speaking about lots today and lots yesterday. So when we are beta brain dominant, and we have a new dream, a new goal, a new desire, the beta waves say don't do that, but we're in that place most of the time. Okay, but what we need to be in, okay, is we have to move into theta wave activity. Theta wave activity. This is the holy grail, and it's so fascinating because the neurological research shows that when we are in theta wave, our brain is most suggestible to accepting new attitudes, beliefs, expectations, ideals. What as Ayurveda and Buddhism have been saying for thousands of years is certain techniques that we now know are proven to mobilize theta waves. They view these as the gateway for moving into the magic. So we've got ancient tradition and modern neuroscience saying the same thing. So theta wave, everyone here will know theta wave and everyone here will recognize it. And it's that because we experience it at least once a day, possibly twice a day. It's that beautiful state just after you wake up and just before you go to sleep. Where you're not awake, but you're not asleep. You know you're not asleep, but you're not quite awake. It usually lasts for somewhere between about 2 minutes and 7 minutes. And we get a big spike in theta wave in the morning and a big spike of theta wave in the evening, right before waking up or going to sleep. Okay, and theta wave is where we know from the MRI work, the brain mapping work, when we are in theta, the brain is not in. When we activate theta regularly for longer periods of time every day, the brain's suggestibility to new ways of being, thinking, and acting increases by about 75%. Okay, after just a few weeks. So suddenly, when we have, as an example, so my example, I need to leave this job in cancer research because it's breaking me, and I want to move into my dream of creating content and writing books and teaching courses and being there for the school runs and bedtime every night, these kind of things. If I'm cultivating those desires from a place of theta, the brain accepts it, and the brain says, actually, that sounds like a good idea. I'm happy with that. It sounds sensible. You've thought it through. Let's go for it. So we're not hijacked by the neocortex, but we can only get the brain to be suggestible during theta. There's no other brain activity that will allow the brain to accept and buy into and be happy with these new ideals. It can only occur in theta. And that's what the Eastern traditions call the golden triangle. Okay, the golden triangle of success, or the golden triangle of moving into the magic, where three things happen. You sever the control of the neocortex, you activate the suggestibility of the brain, and then into that suggestibility, you plant the seeds of where you want to be. What is your ideal? And we're going to talk about that in detail on Wednesday. Ideation. What does the dream look like? What do you need to get healthier? Do you need to sleep better? Do you need to lose weight? Do you need more money? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to strengthen your relationships? Whatever it may be. So sever the negative neocortex, increase the suggestibility of the brain neurologically, sow the seeds. Okay, if those three things happen, we've got the perfect, the optimal foundation to then unleash all of the other techniques. But if those three things aren't in place, in my opinion, nothing's going to work long term. And there's work on Olympic athletes, there's work on surgeons, on entrepreneurs, on airline pilots. Then they're all saying the same thing. They're all using this technique, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, but those three things have to be there. Okay, Ronaldo's a great example of this. He's huge on this. Okay, so and you know, without it, we're kind of doomed, you know, which is why 87% of people never realize these desires and higher ideals, not through their own lack of willpower, because they haven't set themselves up for success through no fault of their own. If those three things are in place, the sky is the limit, and I mean that in the most sincere way. Okay, and that's, like I said, what I put the emphasis on when I made my massive change in 2018. So how do we do it? Okay, the most important, well, the first thing to emphasize is that you don't have to be in theta wave when you sow the seeds. If you activate theta waves for kind of 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes every day, say you did that at 8:30 in the morning, the brain stays suggestible for about 9 or 10 hours after that. So you don't have to, the techniques we're going to explore later in the week, you don't have to embed those during theta. As long as theta is being activated on a daily basis, it will remain suggestible even when it's not in theta. So it opens the door, really. Okay, because I get that question a lot, and for some unknown reason Facebook isn't showing me comments. Okay, so if you asked a question, I'm not ignoring you, I can't see it for some bizarre reason, so I will answer any questions retrospectively once I finish the video. Okay, so what's the most reliable, if theta activity is the linchpin to everything we've spoken about, what's the most reliable, effective, successful way of mobilizing theta consciously? Okay, there are a couple of ways. The most reliable way is some kind of contemplative meditation, whether that's Western meditation, whether it's pranayama, whether it's mantra meditation, whether it's breathing meditation, whether it's mindfulness-based stress reduction, doesn't really matter, okay? But entering into a meditative state is the quickest, most reliable, and most consistently effective way of mobilizing theta. And the beauty of that is it doesn't depend upon experience. I was involved in a research project that looked at this, and if you have people who've never meditated before, and you look at people who've been meditating for 5 years, both are able to mobilize theta almost as effectively as each other. Okay, so the best way is meditation, and I'll talk about the dose for that in a minute. The second way that is not far off in terms of effectiveness is nature immersion. Okay, being out in nature mindfully, listening to bird song, looking at beautiful views, you know, just being surrounded in beautiful natural surroundings away from digital stimulation or noise. That is a reliable inducer of theta. Okay. The other way, which is why all of the Eastern traditions emphasize this, is the 3S model: stillness, solitude, and silence. Okay, we know that the more solitude you have, so the less solitude you have, if you wake up, busy house, husbands, wives, kids, whatever, go to work, busy, come home, busy, go to sleep, your brain is forced to be in beta, negative, kind of most of the time. We need periods of solitude. Okay, there was a fascinating research paper published late last year, and it was talking about the effects of lack of solitude on disease risk factors, and it was you know, mind-blowing. So solitude, silence, stillness, whether that's sitting out in the garden with a cup of tea for 20 minutes, whether it's going out for a walk, whether it's sitting in the bath, just protecting periods of stillness and quiet and calm and solitude activates theta. Okay, and this is a foundational priority. Okay, if we are not activating theta, I don't think anything else after today, in terms of the full blueprint we're going to explore, it's not going to work, because the brain isn't suggestible to what we're doing. Okay, so which is why if you went to a monastery or a center or an ashram or anywhere in the East to learn this, extended periods of meditation, yoga, silence would be non-negotiable. Okay, but there is a dose response, which is we need about 15 minutes is the threshold when we meditate, or we sit in solitude, or we go for a beautiful walk, or we stare at a sunset, or whatever. The theta wave activity increases. Once it gets to 15 minutes, it goes exponential, and every minute after that is exponential as well. So we want to be aiming for kind of 15, 17, 20 minutes engaged in whatever activity you are using. Okay, and obviously now the beauty now is that if you've never meditated before, there's loads of apps, free apps like Calm, Insight Timer. There's loads of guided meditations on YouTube. Headspace is brilliant. I'll share resources on this page. Statistically, to regularly keep theta activated in this way, it's 15 to 20 minutes, 5 days a week. If we're doing that, we know that we regulate and activate theta in a way that allows all these changes to occur in terms of the neuroplasticity, etc., etc. And there's a great example, just before I finish, of Richard Branson. Okay, Richard Branson, obviously the entrepreneur, is a huge advocate of this. And when he was in the process of starting up Virgin Atlantic, okay, everyone told him, this is going to bankrupt you, you're going to lose everything you've got, you're going to sink all of every bit of capital, money and security you have, you're going to sink into this, and it's going to fail, because every other small airline that's ever started has failed. There's no money to be made. This is a disaster. Every single person in his professional life and even in his family were telling him, do not do this. Okay, and he knew that, and his rational brain was saying, don't do it. Okay, his neocortex must have been going crazy. His neocortex was saying, this is a disaster. You're going to go from being a multimillionaire to bankrupt within 18 months. Stay safe, stay secure, stay protected. Do not do this. But he had this burning passion to start this airline. So what did he do? He learned meditation. He learned visualization. He learned goal setting. He learned ideation. All the things we're going to talk about. And he said it allowed him to silence the inner critic. It allowed him to suppress that inner hijacker and say, I want this. It's a passion. It sets me alight. It's a desire that is burning in me. And I know it's right. In my heart, I know this is what I need to do. And I need to quell my rational brain. I need to quell the critics, and I need to make this happen. Fast forward 25 years, what do we know? Virgin Atlantic is the most profitable long-haul airline in the world. Okay, imagine if he'd listened to his rational brain, if the neocortex had won. There would be no Virgin Atlantic. Albert Einstein worked for 4 years to try and bring together the general theory of relativity, the most paradigm-changing theory ever created by humans. 4 years, blood, sweat and tears model, couldn't get there, it was all falling apart, gave up on it. Went for a 45-minute walk around Lake Geneva, and the whole thing came together in just under an hour. Okay, and what did he say? You can't solve your problems from the same mindset that created them. You have to move beyond it. How do you move beyond it? By silencing that self-sabotaging inner critic and increasing the suggestibility of the brain to new ideals. And we have to, I think neurologically, evidentially, from the Eastern traditions, it's non-negotiable. Okay, and the way to do that is to protect a period of time every day, 15-20 minutes, for things like meditation, breathing, pranayama, nature immersion, solitude, just losing ourselves. And if we can do that, the techniques we're going to talk about Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday it's like sowing a seed into fertile soil. Okay, and I know, because I saw how it worked for me. I've seen it, like I said, I teach this to thousands of people over the years. This has to be there. Okay, so again, like I said, I can't see the comments, but if you've got any uncertainties or questions around how you start meditating or where to go if you've never done it before or what apps to use, let me know in the comments. Okay, and I'm sure there's been lots of comments that I will reply to once we finish. Okay, so the first big takeaway, the first big tangible concrete technique and practice from this week, there's going to be loads more coming, is activating theta wave every day through a conscious practicing of a technique like meditation, nature immersion, solitude. Okay, 5 days a week for at least 15 minutes. That will give us what we need, and then we're ready to move on to the next bit. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to talk about the 8 pillars of prosperity. We're going to talk as the most profound overarching framework of success and happiness I've ever seen, and the Eastern Life Audit, which I do every 3 or 4 months and have done for the last 5 years and will do so for the rest of my life. Which is just, and that session is essential. Okay, so hopefully you can join me tomorrow. A massive thank you to have 150, 160 people here. It's an absolute privilege. So I'm super, super, super grateful for you guys being here. I'm gonna finish now, and then I'll answer any questions that have come up over the last 40 or 35 minutes. So have a lovely, lovely evening. Thank you for being here. I will see you live tomorrow at 7.